A Sapphire Running Zone podcast.
Hi, this is Tim from the Sapphire Running Zone, and welcome to another of our training podcasts. And today we are looking at running shoes, how to choose your next pair of running shoes. The great thing about running is it's a relatively low-cost sport to get into and on an ongoing basis. You don't really need a lot of stuff, which is great. Obviously, one of the key things you need, of course, is a decent pair of running shoes. And you'll need more decent running shoes. Now, on average, a pair of running shoes lasts about 400 miles, 600 Ks, something like that. But it does depend on how heavy a runner you are, how you hit the road, what style of runner you are. Some people will go through their shoes a little bit quicker than that. And one of the frustrating things sometimes with running shoes is that you don't necessarily know when you need new shoes because they don't look like it. Sometimes they look amazing still, but actually they need replacing. And the sure sign generally is wear and tear on the sole, or they just don't feel as bouncy as they used to. That doesn't sound particularly scientific, but that is pretty much how you will tell. Now, how do you monitor how many miles you've done in your shoes? Well, pretty easy these days, to be honest. Most of the apps, Runkeeper, Strava, etc., you can put in exactly what shoes you're wearing for any specific run, and then over a period of time, obviously it adds it all up and will tell you at what point you need to change your shoes. So there's no excuse anymore, really. But as I said, the frustrating thing is you might get an alert saying you need new shoes, and when you look at them, they look absolutely fine. And you will be tempted to carry on because they are not cheap, and we'll go through the costs a little bit later on, but they are not cheap. But just remember, it's the dearest part of your kit, unless, of course, you are wearing really expensive jackets, leggings, all that kind of stuff. So the key when you're choosing your shoes is to go to a specialist retailer. This is particularly the case when you're choosing your first pair, or you've decided you want to change to another brand. Don't change shoes just because you don't like the look of the shoes you've got compared to a mate and you fancy something in a different color. Don't go for the superficial approach. Go for what's right for your feet. So head to your nearest running store and get yourself on their gait analysis treadmill. So the way this works is that there's a piece of software which enables you to be monitored. It tracks the way your foot hits the treadmill. And from that, it can make a recommendation as to what type of shoe you should be wearing. Now, there is a little bit of subjectivity to this. I'm not a massive fan of 30 seconds on a treadmill dictates what shoe you should wear. The best type of gait analysis is a much more extensive analysis that you can have done at specialists, not stores, but at specialist physios, etc. And that will give a very clear guide as to what you need. But on the whole, gait analysis in a running store is okay and does the job, but try and stay on for more than 10, 15, 20 seconds. I've seen some stores where they literally get you on there and then straight off as quick as you can. Some people, bearing in mind, have never even run on a treadmill. I'll just give you a quick story. My brother-in-law, many years ago, I took him to a running store to get his feet measured properly. Never run on a treadmill before and fell off the back. Absolute hysterics, obviously, from everyone in the store, but didn't do his confidence a great deal of good. When he went back onto the treadmill, he was obviously running slightly differently than he would have done on the road because he was worried about falling off the back again. So just be really careful in this approach. And if you're not comfortable, just say that I need another couple of minutes on the treadmill before you give me your opinion, because 30 seconds a minute is not a great deal of time. So make sure that you're running as you would do on the road when you're on that treadmill. So basically, as soon as that process has happened, the guys in the store will go out the back and get shoes that match your foot type. And basically, there's two types of shoe in essence. One is a neutral shoe. This is for someone who's got a very normal foot pattern, so they hit the treadmill as you would expect. And then there's another type, which is a support shoe. So two types of shoe, neutral and support. And the support shoe is for what we call pronators, so people whose foot lands on a treadmill at a slight angle, either inside or outside. It doesn't hit it sort of flush on. 70% of us are neutral runners. If, when you're in a store, the suggestion is made that you need a support shoe, then just challenge it a little bit. You don't need to get too concerned about it, but just say, look, could you just explain to me why that is? And they should be able to show you why they recommend a support shoe, and you should be able to see that you're just going over slightly or going in slightly when your foot lands. So it isn't, it's not abnormal by any stretch, but it's way more common to be a neutral runner. So when they get the shoes, they will get, so say you've come out as a neutral runner, they will bring 3 or 4 pairs of neutral shoes out for you. But you also need to give them an idea of budget, because obviously shoes range in price quite significantly now. And basically it's anywhere from, 100 to 200 pounds. There's plenty of top end shoes now at 180, 190 pound, which would have been unheard of 2 or 3 years ago, but that's where everything pretty much is these days. If you spend £100, you're not going to get, top end quality. They will be good, and they will be good enough for you to do a 5K or a 10K, or get into half marathon training. But if you're going to go anything further, then I would recommend that you probably spend a little bit more, maybe 120, 150, and that will be sufficient for you to get yourself a really good pair of shoes. Now, obviously, there are a number of brands in the market. There's a lot of well-known brands like New Balance, Adidas, Nike. There's a number of others that you will have heard of in context of other sports, like, Asics. You'll have heard of On shoes. And then there's the likes of Brooks, which is a specialist running brand. Very, very good shoes, and you will be recommended. I would think if they stock them, they will bring a pair of Brooks shoes out and a pair of Asics shoes more than likely. You might see Saucony, sometimes pronounced Saucony, or Mizuno. There's a lot of brands out there. They're all really strong. It just comes down to you what brand you want to wear, what color shoe you want to wear. But the perfect color shoe for you might not be the one that's available. So they might not have the size. It might be a support shoe and not a neutral shoe. So there's a whole load of things you need to look for. But one of the, it really is important that you get your shoes measured properly. Don't just say, oh, I want to do a 5K, I want to go running, and just go to a high street store and just take a pair of nice looking shoes off the shelf, because they might be totally wrong for your feet. Another quick story. A few years ago, I had really bad Achilles tendon problems, really bad. And to the point was every time I went for a run, it was feeling sore. It was sore to the touch. And I went to the physio, loads of physio on it, spent a fortune. And then in the end, she said, look, I think you might have to have surgery on this, because there's a lot of thick scar tissue around the Achilles now, and it just doesn't feel right at all. So I think we may need to look at some surgery, which obviously, pretty devastating. You don't want to have to do that. So I said to her, look, I've been wearing this, I won't name the brand, but I've been wearing this quite heavy support shoe, and it's very heavy. I mean, really heavy shoe, for years. And basically I had been into a shop, looked at a pair, thought, yeah, they look nice, put them on, started running with them. When they wore out, I got another pair of those, and so on and so on. I've probably done this for 3 years. Completely the wrong shoe for me, as it turns out. I'm a neutral runner. That was a heavy support shoe, the heaviest support shoe that you could buy. So I immediately changed to a neutral shoe, and bang, the problem went. I have not had sore Achilles since. So that's quite a sobering one. I could have gone under the knife because I was wearing the wrong kind of shoes. So something to be very, very aware of. And, that's why it's so important to go and go to a specialist running store. Most towns have got them. They are pretty hard to maintain these days financially, but most towns will have one, or there'll be one within 20 miles or so. So it's definitely worth making the trip. Don't run too far in them to start with. Obviously, you need to wear these in. This might be the first time that you've ever had a pair of running shoes like this. So wear them in gradually. Don't go too far too soon. So a mile or two at a time is great. And if you're going to do an event, make sure that you've got plenty of miles in those shoes before you do your first event in them. There's nothing worse than, you got half marathon coming up or 10K coming up. You buy a pair of shoes a couple of weeks beforehand. You won't have enough miles in them to do your race properly, and you could well get blisters or some kind of injury because you're not used to wearing that particular kind of shoe. If it's a replacement shoe, that's different. But if it's a new shoe you've not worn before, then just be careful. The other thing to look for when you're buying a pair of shoes, whether it's your first pair or replacement pair, is what we call the drop. So this is the difference between the heel and the toe in terms of the height. So some shoes have a higher drop than others. Some are much higher drop. Some have no drop at all. So just be careful if you're trying a new shoe out, and if you're going from like an average drop, and they're all measured in millimeters, going from an average drop to one with no drop, because that could well affect the way you run. I tried a pair of shoes a couple of years ago with a 0 drop, and I've been wearing one with like, I think it was 10 mil drop. And that, my first run, I came back with knee pain, and I didn't wear a 0 drop again. Now, that was just a bit of a reaction from being used to wearing a shoe with a certain drop to wearing one with no drop. So again, be careful with that whole issue of the drop. When you're replacing a pair of shoes, just be careful again when you change the model. So a lot of people will get a shoe fitted in a specialist store and then buy a replacement online. And obviously there are loads of retailers online who don't have stores. They're just specialists in online retail, and that's great. But what they don't do, obviously, is offer any sort of measuring service or, this whole gait analysis concept. They just sell shoes. Now, one of the big issues with shoe models is that you might have gone for, brand A, model B, and when you come to replace that and the model B has been phased out and they've now got model C that's come in, well, you might look at that and go, well, it looks exactly the same as model B. It might not be. There might be some subtle changes, and most of the brands do this. They will update a shoe, so there might be different colorways, but they might have also made some slight change to the structure, the makeup of the shoe. It might be the sole might be slightly different. It might have a higher protective piece at the back. So the laces might be done slightly differently. The tongue might be set differently. So don't assume that when you buy a replacement shoe that's a newer model, that it will be exactly the same as the older model. What you're best doing is hunting around and seeing if you can find an exact like-for-like replacement. So another Model B that, yes, it will be technically out of date because it will have been replaced by another. But if you love that shoe and you've really got on with that shoe, then you're best off sticking with it. The other side, if you want to be totally up to date with the shoes that you're wearing, go back to the specialist running store, ask to try on the Model C and buy it from those guys. Support your local retailers, but also go on the treadmill again with that shoe, and you might say, oh God, this actually is quite different to the other one. Can I see what else you've got available? And it might be that something else is now absolutely perfect for you. What you do see a lot of, unfortunately, is people going back to the retailer, trying on Model C and going, yeah, now that is actually really good. Let me think about it. And then they just go away and buy it online. So, again, if you can support the local retailer as much as you can, then that's great. And it guarantees that you have got the exact right shoe for you. Another point about choosing older shoes. So if you find that you've got a Model B that you found and it's a year old, just be aware that the gel in the shoe sole may have deteriorated slightly. it's not a given that that gel will be in exactly the same condition that it was in when it was first made. It's almost like there's some leakage over time. So just bear that in mind. If you do buy a pair of shoes that's a year, sometimes you can still find these things online when they're 2 years old, and you might go, oh, this is the perfect shoe that I've worn all these years. I want another pair of these, and they'll be fine, but just bear in mind that the sole will be slightly less cushioned than it was when it was first manufactured because of this leakage, if you can call it that, from the sole. Make sure, of course, that you also have decent running socks. And I can't stress how important this is. So you've just been in, you've spent £180 on your dream pair of shoes, and you go home and you take out one of your £2 pair of cotton socks, and away you go. Don't do that. When you're in the store, buy a decent pair of running socks. They can be £10, £15, but if you just spent all that money on a pair of quality running shoes, don't let them down with a rubbish pair of socks. So there's all different types of socks. Obviously, there's the blister-proof socks. There's shorter socks. There's long compression socks. It's almost as a complex world as running shoes. There are so many different options. Obviously there's one for your left foot, one for your right foot. They're laid out slightly differently. Just invest in them and get that right, because there's nothing worse than getting blisters because you've got rubbish socks on, and people immediately go, oh, it's the shoes. It must be the new shoes I'm wearing. It probably isn't. It's probably just the socks are just not good enough for what it is you're putting them through. So what I would say to anyone is, irrespective of where you are in your running journey, go and see a specialist retailer and get an opinion on your shoes. Whether you've been wearing the same shoe for years, whether you're just going and buying your very first pair of shoes, get an opinion on people who know what they're talking about. These guys live these products. And you want to make sure you get it right, and you want to make sure that you don't get injured, because having the wrong shoes, I touched on with my Achilles issues, having the wrong pair of shoes can lead to a world of pain. And often you just don't realize that that you've got the wrong shoes. So let's assume you've got the right shoes. How do you look after them? Well, one thing you do not do is put them in a washing machine. And as tempting as that can be, particularly if you're someone that likes to look the part all the time and doesn't like going around with dirty shoes, that is something that a lot of people do. And the reason you don't want to be doing that is because the heat of the washing machine can break down the glue that holds these shoes together. So don't be tempted to come back from a run and chuck them in the machine, take them out, stick them on the radiator, and think that that's job done. It won't be job done. The glue will be damaged from the washing machine, and the heat from the radiator will further damage the glue and potentially cause some kind of shrinkage in there. So the ideal situation here is to give them a good scrub with cold water, as much as you can with a sort of stiffish brush, and then get paper and stuff the paper inside the shoe, and that then absorbs all the moisture and let them dry naturally. I agree, you won't get the shoe quite as clean as you would do if you put it in the washing machine, but you will prolong its life quite significantly. And do this, a few times. Don't let the shoe get in an absolutely awful state before you give it a wipe down. Just do it quite regularly, but don't use any artificial heat to clean them or to dry them. As the shoe gets older, obviously it's not such a problem. I do put old running shoes in the washing machine now, but these are shoes that I'm using to mow the lawn or cut the hedge or whatever. They're not shoes that I go running in, and they get very dirty out in the garden. So yeah, I've got no problem putting them in the washing machine when I'm not wearing them anymore, because I know, when I'm not wearing them to run, because I know that they're towards the end of their life, so it doesn't really matter. But don't be tempted to put them in the washing machine. That will reduce their lifespan quite significantly. So take your time choosing your shoes. Don't rush into it. You may want to go to a couple of retailers and get an opinion, but I would just stress the need to go to a specialist to make that decision, and don't be tempted just to go into your local town, go to a big retailer, pick one off the shelf, and be happy that that's sorted out your running needs. It may do, but it also may not, and the may not may lead to a significant injury over time. If I hadn't made that decision to buy those shoes without having been on a treadmill and had gait analysis, if I hadn't made that decision, I would have saved myself hundreds of pounds in physio bills, and I would have saved myself a lot of distress and a lot of hurt from that Achilles injury. So just be very, very mindful. You might be absolutely fine, but you might not be. So why take the risk? Why not just head into a specialist retailer and get a proper professional opinion from people that are talking shoes all the time? They know what they're doing. They do loads of races, most of these guys. They know what works and what doesn't work. And it's well worth investing in that visit and then spending the right money on the shoe. It might be that your budget was 120, but actually that £140 pair of shoes is absolutely the right one for you. So try and find the extra 20 if you can, and invest it wisely in those shoes. Then, of course, get some decent socks. Right, well, I hope you enjoyed that training podcast. Finding your right shoes is obviously so critical. We will have other podcasts to look at other bits of kit as well. Obviously, you've got your shirts, shorts, leggings, jackets, all sorts, but the shoes are absolutely critical. So thanks for joining me, and look forward to welcoming you to another training podcast soon.
Thanks for listening to this Sapphire Running Zone podcast. Keep checking back as we have lots more podcasts coming soon.